Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell, because today we are taking a closer look at a South African 1 Rand coin dated 1997 that may look ordinary at first, but has some fascinating details that collectors should never ignore. When you hold a 1997 1 Rand in your hand, it is easy to think of it as simply an old piece of everyday money. But coins can become interesting collectibles because of their age, design, condition, production history, and the demand created by collectors. The 1997 1 Rand is especially worth examining because there were different versions connected with this year. The regular 1997 1 Rand had a reported mintage of about 38.876 million pieces, making it far from an extremely rare circulation coin. Current collector references list indicative values for ordinary examples from only a few cents up to around $1.10 depending on condition. These figures are estimates, not guaranteed selling prices. Namista. But this is where the story becomes much more interesting. Not every 1997 1 Rand should automatically be judged by the same price. Collectors carefully separate ordinary circulated coins from pieces that have unusually sharp details, attractive surfaces, excellent preservation, special finishes, or a documented connection to a collector set. For anyone who inherited an old coin collection, this is an important lesson. Never assume that a coin is valuable simply because it is old, and never assume that an old-looking coin is worthless simply because it was once used in circulation. The condition and exact variety can completely change the collector appeal. Look closely at the lettering, the date, the edge, and the main design elements. Years of handling can leave scratches, small dents, discoloration, and worn details. A coin that has spent decades moving through pockets and cash registers can look dramatically different from one that was carefully preserved from the beginning. That is why serious collectors often use magnification and good lighting when examining older coins. Small details that are almost invisible to the naked eye can help determine whether a piece is simply a normal example or something that deserves further investigation. The 1997 issue also had limited production versions associated with brilliant uncirculated sets and proof sets. Namista records 7,515 pieces for the BU set version and 3,596 proof examples for 1997. Namista. That difference is important because collectors generally treat specially produced coins differently from ordinary circulation pieces. And there is another fascinating 1997 South African 1 Rand that should not be confused with the regular circulation issue. A commemorative silver 1 Rand from the Women of South Africa series was also issued in 1997. It was struck in .925 silver, weighs 15 grams, and has a reported mintage of only 983 regular pieces plus 3,184 proof pieces. Namista. So when someone says, "I have a 1997 1 Rand," the first question should actually be, which 1997 1 Rand? That single question can make a huge difference when researching the coin. If you have one at home, take a moment before cleaning it. This is extremely important because cleaning can permanently damage a coin's original surface and may reduce its desirability among collectors. Instead, handle it carefully by the edges and examine it under good light. And remember, the most exciting part of coin collecting is not always finding a coin worth a fortune. Sometimes the real treasure is discovering the history behind a piece that has quietly survived for decades. Stay with me, because in the final part we are going to look at the condition factors that can make a 1997 1 Rand more desirable, the details you should check before judging your coin, and finally the estimated value figure connected with today's video. Now let us get to the part every collector wants to know: what should you actually look for on a 1997 South African 1 Rand? The first thing is condition. A heavily circulated coin with scratches, worn lettering, and damaged surfaces will normally have much less collector appeal than a coin that has remained bright, sharp, and almost untouched. For the standard 1997 circulation 1 Rand, Namista lists indicative values from about 7 cents in good condition to around $1.10 in uncirculated condition. These are guide figures rather than guaranteed market prices. The second thing is the version of the coin. This matters enormously. The standard 1997 1 Rand had a reported mintage of 38,876,000 pieces. But there were also 7,515 examples associated with brilliant uncirculated sets and 3,596 proof examples. A proof coin can have a very different appearance from an ordinary circulation coin, with specially prepared surfaces and sharper presentation. So if your 1997 1 Rand looks unusually polished, carefully made, or has a presentation quality unlike normal pocket change, it deserves closer examination. And there is one more possibility that makes the year 1997 especially fascinating. South Africa also issued a completely different commemorative 1 Rand connected with the Women of South Africa series. This version was struck in .925 silver, weighs 15 grams, and had only 983 regular examples and 3,184 proof examples according to Nemista. That means you should never judge a 1997 1 Rand only by the date. Look at the design, metal, weight, size, and overall appearance before deciding what you have. And please do not clean the coin. A shiny coin is not automatically a valuable coin. Aggressive cleaning can leave scratches and unnatural surfaces that collectors may dislike. Instead, keep it safely stored and handle it by the edges. Now comes the number many viewers have been waiting for. For the purpose of today's video, the potential value figure we are highlighting is $1,264. But remember, that is a video feature figure, not a claim that every ordinary 1997 1 Rand is worth $1,264. Actual value depends on the exact variety, condition, authenticity, and what a collector is willing to pay. So before you spend, sell, or discard your 1997 1 Rand, examine it carefully. That little coin may be ordinary, special, or part of a much more interesting story than you first imagined. If you enjoyed this coin discovery, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more South African coins, hidden varieties, fascinating history, and valuable pieces that may still be sitting unnoticed in old collections, drawers, jars, or family values. You definitely do not want to miss what we uncover next. And today, we are taking a closer look at a South African 1 Rand coin from 1991, a coin that may look familiar and ordinary at first glance, but can become much more interesting when you know exactly what details to examine. The 1 Rand 1991 belongs to an important period in South African history. Coins from this era are especially interesting to collectors because they connect everyday currency with a country going through major political, social, and economic changes. For someone who handled these coins decades ago, the date 1991 may immediately bring back memories. But for collectors today, that same date can make the coin worth taking a second look at. One of the biggest mistakes people make with old coins is assuming that age automatically means enormous value. In reality, collectors usually look at several factors together. The condition of the coin, the quality of the strike, the amount of wear, the appearance of the surfaces, and whether the coin has an unusual characteristic can all influence its desirability. The 1991 1 Rand is particularly interesting because standard examples were produced in significant numbers. Nemista lists a mintage of about 20.765 million circulation pieces for 1991, along with much smaller quantities associated with special collector sets and proof issues. That means an ordinary circulated example should not automatically be considered extremely rare. But this is exactly where the story becomes interesting. When millions of coins were produced, most were used heavily. They were carried in pockets, placed in cash registers, exchanged in shops, and exposed to scratches, dirt, and contact with other coins. Finding one that still has strong original detail and attractive surfaces can therefore be much more exciting to a collector. Look closely at your coin rather than simply looking at the date. Examine the lettering, the portrait or central design, the rim, and the smallest details. Are the edges sharp? Does the design still show strong definition? Are there deep scratches across the main surfaces? Has the coin been polished? These questions can make a major difference when determining collector interest. Another important point is authenticity. Whenever a coin is claimed to be worth a very large amount, collectors should slow down and verify the facts. Online videos and listings can sometimes show extraordinary asking prices that are not the same as confirmed selling prices. A realistic evaluation should consider the exact variety, condition, provenance, and actual market evidence. The South African Mint's published production information also shows that 1991 was an active year for South African coin production, while special collector products were produced in much smaller quantities. And that gives us an important lesson. The coin in your hand may not be valuable simply because it says 1991. What matters is what version you have and what condition it is in. So before you put that old R1 back into a drawer, take another look. Use good lighting, avoid cleaning it, and inspect both sides carefully. A natural original surface is generally much more desirable than a coin that has been aggressively polished or scratched. And there is still one major question left. What could a remarkable 1991 R1 actually be worth in the scenario we are discussing today? Stay with me, because in the second part we will focus on the condition, collector factors, possible premium characteristics, and finally reveal the $1,241 value figure featured for this video. Now let's get to the part that every collector wants to know. What can make a R1 1991 stand out from an ordinary example? The first thing to understand is that there is more than one collecting category connected with the 1991 date. Numista records about 20.765 million circulation strikes for the standard 1991 R1, while separate 1991 examples from brilliant, uncirculated and proof sets were produced in much smaller quantities. That distinction matters because a regular circulated coin and a specially prepared collector coin are not necessarily valued the same way. If your coin has been in circulation for years, expect to see small scratches, contact marks, dull areas, and wear on the highest parts of the design. Those characteristics are normal. But if you discover a 1991 example with exceptionally clean surfaces, sharp details, and very little evidence of circulation, collectors may pay closer attention to it. The next thing to inspect is the strike. A strong strike means the design details are clearly defined rather than soft or weak. Look carefully around the lettering and the central features. If something appears unusually doubled, shifted, missing, or dramatically different from a normal example, do not immediately assume it is valuable. Photograph it clearly and have the feature compared with authenticated examples before making a claim. This is especially important because genuine mint errors can attract collectors, while ordinary damage that happened after the coin left the mint usually does not carry the same premium. Another factor is originality. Cleaning an old coin may seem like a good idea, but aggressive polishing can actually reduce collector appeal. A coin with natural surfaces and attractive original luster is generally preferable to one that has been scrubbed until it shines unnaturally. There is also a fascinating collector angle surrounding proof and special set examples. Numista records 12,000 proof pieces for the 1991 issue and 15,000 pieces associated with a BU set. NGC also lists separate 1991 proof information, demonstrating why identifying the exact version of a coin is important before estimating its value. So if you have a R1 dated 1991, don't just ask, "How old is it?" Ask better questions. Is it a normal circulation strike? Is it from a special set? Does it have proof-like characteristics? Is the condition unusually strong? Does it show a genuine mint error or unusual variety? And most importantly, can the claim about its value be supported by credible market evidence? Current catalog references show ordinary 1991 circulation examples at relatively modest values depending on grade, which is a useful reminder that a normal circulated coin should not automatically be described as a four-figure rarity. But for today's video, we are highlighting a potential value figure of $1,241 for an exceptional example or a scenario involving unusual collector interest and premium characteristics. That figure should be treated as a featured estimate for this video, not as a guaranteed selling price for every 1991 1 rand. And that difference is incredibly important. If someone tells you that every 1 rand 1991 is worth $1,241, be careful. Coin values depend on condition, variety, authenticity, certification, demand, and actual transactions. A rare error or extraordinary specimen can be dramatically different from a common circulated coin. So take your time. Don't clean the coin. Don't throw it away. Don't assume it is worthless simply because it looks ordinary. Place it somewhere safe, photograph both sides, examine the edge, and compare it carefully with reliable references. And remember, sometimes the most exciting discoveries are not the coins that look spectacular at first. They are the coins sitting quietly in an old collection, a forgotten box, or a family drawer, waiting for someone to recognize what makes them different. So, if you have a South African 1 rand dated 1991, take another look today. Your coin may be a common circulation piece, or it may have a special characteristic that deserves much closer attention. And if this discovery surprised you, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because there are plenty more old coins with fascinating stories waiting to be examined. The 1991 1 rand may have started as ordinary money, but in the world of collecting, the smallest details can sometimes create the biggest questions. For this video, the featured value is $1,241. Check your coin carefully, protect its original condition, and remember that the real value of any collectible coin should always be confirmed through proper identification and current market evidence. If you enjoy South African coins, vintage money, and fascinating stories about coins that collectors still search for today, stay with me until the very end, because this 1996 South African 1 center has a story that is much more interesting than its tiny size suggests. When most people see a 1-cent coin from 1996, they may simply think of it as a small piece of change from another time. It is easy to overlook because the coin is tiny, lightweight, and was produced for everyday circulation. But collectors often look at old coins differently. They do not only ask what the denomination says. They want to know when the coin was made, how many were produced, what design it carries, how well it survived, and whether there is anything unusual about the individual example sitting in front of them. The 1996 South African 1 center belongs to an especially interesting period in the country's modern history. The coin carries the South African coat of arms and the words, "Iningisima Africa," along with the date 1996. On the reverse, you can find the denomination and the image of Cape sparrows, giving this little coin a distinctive character that separates it from many other coins of the period. The specifications are also worth remembering. The coin is made from copper-plated steel, weighs about 1.5 grams, and measures approximately 15 millimeters across. It has a milled edge and a round shape. These details may sound simple, but they are exactly the kinds of characteristics collectors use when identifying a coin and comparing it with other examples from the same era. And here is where things become interesting for anyone who has an old coin collection at home. The 1996 issue is reported with a very large circulation mintage of around 255 million pieces. That means the normal circulated version is not considered a rare coin simply because it carries the 1996 date. Current collector references show that ordinary examples generally have modest values, with condition making a noticeable difference. Uncirculated pieces can be worth more than heavily worn examples, while special set or proof examples can attract different collector interest. So why would anyone pay serious attention to a coin that was produced in such large numbers? The answer is condition, originality, variety, and the story behind the individual coin. A heavily scratched coin that has spent decades in circulation is very different from an example that has retained sharp details, clean surfaces, strong lettering, and much of its original appearance. Collectors know that preservation can dramatically change the desirability of a coin. That is why two coins with exactly the same date and denomination can receive very different attention. If you have one of these coins, do not immediately clean it. Cleaning can damage the original surface and may actually reduce collector appeal. Instead, look closely at the lettering, the date, the coat of arms, the bird design, the edge, and the overall condition. Use good lighting and, if possible, magnification. Small differences that are difficult to see with the naked eye can sometimes be important when identifying a coin. And remember, an old coin does not have to be extremely rare to be interesting. Sometimes its greatest value is the history it carries. A 1996 coin connects us to a specific moment in South African history and to a generation that used these coins in everyday transactions. But there is still one question every viewer is waiting for. What could this 1996 1 cent actually be worth? And could a special example reach the surprising figure collectors talk about? That is where the final part of our story becomes even more important. Because the date alone is not enough to determine a coin's value. If you have a normal circulated South African 1 cent dated 1996, it is important to keep your expectations realistic. Current collector references indicate that millions of these coins were produced, with a reported circulation mintage of 255 million. Indicative values listed for ordinary examples range from only a few cents to around $0.50 depending on condition, while an uncirculated example can be worth somewhat more. Special versions from sets or proof issues are separate categories and can command different prices. That information gives us an important lesson. The date 1996 by itself does not automatically make this coin extremely rare. But this is exactly why you should inspect your coin carefully. Look at the surfaces under bright light. Is the design still sharp? Are the letters clear? Is the date completely visible? Does the coin have unusual marks that appear to have been created during minting rather than through years of circulation? Check the rim as well. A genuine mint error can sometimes attract much more attention than an ordinary example, but it should be authenticated before anyone claims an extraordinary value. Another fascinating point is that the South African Mint's historical production data records separate 1996 minting figures for collectible products, showing that not every 1996 coin belongs to the same category. This is why collectors should never judge a coin only by looking at the date. And now comes the number many viewers have been waiting for. For the purpose of this video, we are highlighting a potential top figure of $1,583, but this should not be presented as the confirmed market value of an ordinary 1996 1 cent. There is no reliable evidence in the current references we checked that a standard 1996 circulation coin is worth $1,583. A price that high would require extraordinary circumstances, such as a genuinely rare error, exceptional provenance, or a special certified example. So if you discover a 1996 1 cent in an old family collection, do not throw it away simply because it looks common. Preserve it, avoid cleaning it, and examine it carefully. The real excitement of coin collecting is not believing every huge price you hear online. It is learning how to separate an ordinary coin from an unusual one. That little 1 cent may not make you a millionaire, but it can still be a fascinating piece of South African history. And sometimes, the greatest treasure is not the price printed on a screen, but the story hidden inside the coin you almost ignored. So take another look at your old coins. Check the dates, study the details, and keep searching. Your next interesting discovery could be sitting quietly in a drawer, an old jar, or a forgotten collection. And if you enjoyed this 1996 South African 1 center story, make sure you subscribe, because there are many more old coins with surprising histories waiting to be discovered. Family collection could turn out to be something collectors are searching for. Today, we are taking a closer look at the South African 1 Rand from 1994, a coin that comes from one of the most memorable years in South African history. At first glance, the 1994 1 Rand may not appear particularly unusual. It is a small coin, made for everyday circulation, and millions were produced. But this is exactly what makes old coins so interesting. A coin does not always become collectible simply because it is extremely old. Sometimes the story behind the date, the condition, the design, and the details that survived over the years can make an ordinary-looking piece much more interesting. The year 1994 immediately stands out. It was a historic turning point for South Africa, and coins from this period can carry a special appeal for collectors who enjoy connecting currency with important moments in history. When you hold a 1994 1 Rand today, you are not simply holding an old piece of metal. You are holding an object that circulated during a remarkable chapter of the country's past. The regular 1994 1 Rand belongs to a series issued during the early 1990s. It features the South African coat of arms on one side, together with the country's name and the motto, Ex Unite Vires, meaning, power through unity. The opposite side features the springbok and the denomination of 1 Rand. These details give the coin a distinctive South African identity. And here is where things become especially interesting for collectors. Two coins with exactly the same year and denomination can have dramatically different appeal. One may have heavy scratches, worn lettering, dull surfaces, and signs of years of circulation. Another may have unusually sharp details, attractive surfaces, and very little evidence of handling. That difference in condition can completely change the collector's interest. So, if you have a 1994 1 Rand, do not immediately assume it is worthless just because you have seen many similar coins before. Instead, take a careful look at the date, lettering, edges, design details, and overall condition. Avoid cleaning it, because aggressive cleaning can damage the original surface and reduce collector appeal. There is another fascinating reason this year deserves attention. South Africa also produced special commemorative 1 Rand coins in 1994, including silver issues connected with important national themes. These should not be confused with the normal circulating 1 Rand. So which 1994 1 Rand do you actually have, and what features could make yours more interesting to collectors? Stay with me, because in the second half we are going to examine the details that can separate an ordinary example from a much more desirable one, and at the very end, I will reveal the value figure for this video. Now let us look more closely at what really matters when examining a 1994 1 Rand. The first thing to remember is that rarity alone does not automatically create a huge price. Collectors also care about condition, originality, eye appeal, and whether the coin has a genuine unusual feature. The regular 1994 1 Rand had a substantial mintage of about 54.6 million pieces, which means ordinary circulated examples are not considered extremely rare. Current catalog references place typical examples at relatively modest values, with prices changing according to grade and market demand. That may sound disappointing at first, but it actually makes the search more exciting. Why? Because the real treasure hunt is not simply about finding the date 1994. It is about discovering an example that stands apart from the normal coins. Start by examining the surface under good lighting. Look for scratches, dents, discoloration, heavy wear, or signs that someone has polished the coin. A coin that has been aggressively cleaned can lose much of its original character. Collectors generally prefer natural surfaces, especially when the original details remain sharp. Next, study the lettering and the design. Look carefully at the numerals in the date, the denomination, the coat of arms, and the springbok design. Compare the coin with another genuine 1994 example if you have one available. Small differences can sometimes be important, but do not assume that every tiny mark is a valuable mint error. Many marks are simply the result of circulation. The edge deserves attention too. Check whether it looks normal and consistent around the entire coin. Unusual striking characteristics, major doubling, dramatic off-center strikes, or other genuine minting errors can attract more collector interest than ordinary damage. There is also another 1994 1 Rand that collectors should know about. South Africa issued commemorative silver 1 Rand coins during this historic year. One commemorated the presidential inauguration of Nelson Mandela, while another commemorated the centenary of the first game park in southern Africa. These were non-circulating silver issues and are completely different from the regular 4-gram nickel-plated copper circulation coin. That distinction is extremely important. Someone looking at a photograph online may see 1 Rand 1994 and assume every coin has the same value. They do not. The metal, design, mintage, packaging, condition, and type can make a major difference. For example, the commemorative presidential inauguration 1 rand was struck in .925 silver and had a mintage of only 6,269 according to the catalog information. That is a completely different collecting category from the millions of ordinary circulation pieces. So before you spend money or sell an old coin, identify exactly which version you have. And now we have reached the moment many collectors have been waiting for. You may have wondered why we have been examining every detail so carefully. What is the value figure we are using for today's video? For this video, the headline value is $1,275. But remember, that figure should not be treated as a guaranteed selling price for every 1994 1 rand. A normal circulated example can be worth far less, while a special issue, exceptional condition coin, or genuinely rare variety can attract very different prices. Current reference data itself shows that ordinary examples are generally valued much lower, while special 1994 commemorative pieces can command substantially more. So check your coin carefully before you put it away. That little 1 rand from 1994 may be ordinary, or it may deserve a much people might completely overlook. It is the 1 cent from 1973, and if you have an old coin collection, a family coin box, or a forgotten group of coins from decades ago, you may want to take a closer look before deciding that this little piece is worthless. The 1973 South African 1 center belongs to an important period in the country's decimal coinage history. At first glance, it may appear to be nothing more than a common low-denomination coin, but collectors know that the story behind an old coin can be just as interesting as its face value. According to Namista's current catalog information, approximately 35,898,000 regular 1973 1-cent coins were produced, while a much smaller proof issue of about 10,850 pieces is also recorded. That difference is extremely important for collectors because not every 1973 1 cent is the same from a collecting perspective. So, when you find a 1973 1 cent, don't immediately judge it by the number printed on the coin. The original denomination is only one part of the story. Age, condition, striking quality, surface preservation, and whether the coin is a regular circulation example or a proof example can all influence collector interest. Think about how many hands may have touched this coin during its lifetime. It could have traveled through shops, pockets, cash registers, banks, and households before eventually disappearing into a drawer or collection. More than 50 years later, that ordinary journey is exactly what gives an old coin its character. One of the biggest mistakes new collectors make is assuming that every old coin must automatically be valuable simply because it is old. That isn't how the collectible coin market works. Rarity and demand matter, and condition can make a dramatic difference. For the regular 1973 issue, current catalog estimates are modest across circulated grades. Namista lists indicative values around 11 cents in several lower grades, rising to roughly 23 cents in very fine and around 37 cents in extremely fine and higher listed grades. These figures are only guide values and can change depending on the market, the exact variety, and the individual coin's condition. But here is where things become much more interesting. If your coin has exceptionally sharp details, clean surfaces, attractive original appearance, and very little evidence of circulation, it deserves much closer attention. A collector is not simply looking at the date. They are examining the entire coin. Look closely at the lettering. Examine the portrait and other major design elements. Check the rim for damage. Look at the fields between the design and the lettering. Tiny scratches, cleaning marks, stains, corrosion, or heavy wear can all affect how collectors view the piece. And don't forget the proof version. The catalog records only about 10,850 proof examples for 1973, dramatically fewer than the regular circulation mintage. A proof coin was made with a different purpose from an ordinary circulation coin. It was produced for presentation and collecting, so its surfaces and design details can look noticeably different. If you believe your 1973 1 cent might be a proof, don't clean it. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and potentially reduce its desirability. This is also why your first step should be identification rather than valuation. Before thinking about a huge price, make sure you know exactly what version of the coin you have. And there is one more reason you should keep watching, because at the end of this video I will reveal the value figure we are using for this 1973 South African 1 center. And we will also talk about what could make one example more interesting than another. So take that old coin out of the box, place it under good light, and look at it carefully. Sometimes the most overlooked coins are the ones that teach collectors the most. Now let's talk about the part every collector wants to know. What could your 1973 South African 1 center actually be worth? The answer depends heavily on the exact example you have. Current catalog information lists the regular 1973 issue at approximately 11 cents in lower circulated grades, about 23 cents in very fine condition, and around 37 cents in extremely fine through uncirculated condition. These are guide values, not guaranteed selling prices. That may sound surprising if you have seen dramatic claims online about old coins selling for thousands of dollars. But this is exactly why experienced collectors examine coins carefully instead of believing every headline. A normal circulated 1973 1 cent should not automatically be called a $1,000 coin. However, unusual examples, exceptional condition, recognized varieties, errors, or scarce collector versions can receive much more attention than an ordinary piece. The 1973 proof issue is especially interesting because only about 10,850 examples are listed, compared with approximately 35,898,000 regular circulation coins. So if your coin has a noticeably different presentation, unusually sharp details, or a polished-looking proof appearance, it may deserve additional research. But please remember one important rule: never clean an old coin just because it looks dirty. Scrubbing, polishing, chemicals, or abrasive materials can leave permanent marks. Collectors generally prefer original surfaces, and an attractive natural appearance can be more desirable than a coin that has been aggressively cleaned. You should also inspect the edge and rim. Look for unusual shapes, missing metal, cracks, doubling, off-center striking, or other characteristics that don't look normal. A genuine mint error can be much more interesting than a standard circulated coin, but it should be properly authenticated before assigning a major value. Another important factor is condition. Imagine two identical 1973 coins sitting next to each other. One is heavily worn, scratched, and stained. The other has crisp lettering, strong design details, smooth original surfaces, and very little circulation wear. Even though both carry the same date, collectors may view them very differently. This is why good lighting and careful inspection matter. If you inherited your coin from a parent or grandparent, don't dismiss it simply because it came from an ordinary household collection. Older family collections sometimes contain coins that were saved decades ago, when people had no idea that future collectors might become interested in them. And now we reach the value figure promised at the beginning. For this video, the headline value we are highlighting for the 1973 South African 1 center is $1,299. But this should be understood as a special case or promotional target value for an exceptional example, not the normal market value of every 1973 1 cent. Current catalog guidance for ordinary examples is far lower, so viewers should never assume that every coin from 1973 is automatically worth $1,299. The real lesson is much more valuable than any single dollar figure. Identify your coin correctly, check its condition, look for unusual characteristics, and compare it with reliable collector information before deciding what you have. So before you throw that little 1973 1 cent into a jar of ordinary change, take another look. More than 50 years of history are sitting on that tiny piece of metal. And if you enjoy discovering the stories and hidden possibilities behind old South African coins, make sure you subscribe to the channel. You never know which forgotten coin we will examine next.